This week on Forever Spinning, we peel back the layers of Brian Eno's timeless record, the magnificent ambient pop 1975 release, Another Green World.
Perfect.
Before he released Ambient 1 Music for Airports, basically making him the godfather of ambient music, and after his days of playing synths in the band Roxy Music, Brian Eno found himself at a weird place in his life. He claims he started his first midlife crisis at the age of 18, and it's pretty much been the same since then. In 1973, Eno had left Roxy Music for a chance at a solo career in music. He got right to work, releasing these weird experimental pop records like Here Come the Warm Jets and Taking Tiger Mountain by Strategy. However, Eno said that lyrics simply do not interest him, especially during that time period, which is how we land on Another Green World, a pop record with 14 tracks, but only 5 of the tracks have lyrics. How can there be a pop album that doesn't even follow the common idea or understanding of what a pop album is? You could call it experimental pop, but what justice does a fairly blanket adjective give to something so groundbreaking? The beautiful thing about this record and Eno's work in general is that you do not need these genre descriptors to help you understand his music. Another Green World being his magnum opus and accomplishing a genreless album. The magic behind this record comes from our mind's ability to hear the instrumental patterns in each song and associate one movement to the next without jumping to the conclusion that we're on the next track. The fact that each song can bleed into the next gives this undeniable feeling of cohesiveness. The lyrics are also nothing more than just words or phrases that conjure up common emotions that we all feel towards certain unspoken associations. More on that idea when we talk about the singles. Eno settled into Island Studios in London from July to August of 1975 to begin recording the album. Only problem, he had no ideas to start off with and was feeling rather unproductive. He turned to his oblique strategy cards, which were basically nothing more than index cards with written instructions or suggestions to help a musician overcome creative block. And with the help of these oblique strategy cards, which would say pretty insane things like delete an entire song or use a brand new instrument, he began writing the record. With the help of musicians like Phil Collins, who had previously helped Eno on work such as Here Come the Warm Jets and Taking Tiger Mountain, Robert Fripp of King Crimson, and John Cale of the Velvet Underground fame, the record was finally starting to come together. However, strangely enough, many of the musicians never actually saw each other while they were in the studio. It was just that hectic. Eno took matters into his own hands for some songs such as The Big Ship and In Dark Trees, where he played every single instrument. His experimentations with pop continued to become weirder and weirder, but were seemingly more effective and sounded great. Once completed, Another Green World came out in September of 1975 to little to no airplay, but it was greeted with immediate acknowledgement for its critical success. So there are actually no singles off of this album, but that isn't going to stop me from talking about a couple tracks. And the first song that I would like to talk about is St. Elmo's Fire. This song is one of the few off the album that actually features lyrics, along with a more conventional pop song structure and composition. As I mentioned earlier, Eno's lyrics are typically nothing more than just words or phrases that help conjure up a common idea inside the listener that we can all kind of understand and rally behind. But in the case of this song, it's actually a mixture of both the lyrics and the instrumentals that help create an overarching emotion. The track is named after a weather phenomenon in which a strong force of electricity is basically prodded at to create this beautiful, cataclysmic, plasma-like lightning that is absolutely gorgeous to look at. Through his loop pianos and various electronic progressions, Eno is able to summon a feeling that is similar to that of St. Elmo's Fire. Not to mention Robert Fripp's high-soaring, quick guitar strikes add a needed sense of danger to this picturesque spectacle. And to me, it's a shame that the song was never an actual single, because St. Elmo's Fire definitely deserves some radio play. Next up, the track I'll Come Running deserves much more attention than it actually receives. The song is much less ambitious in terms of the instrumental, but that is mostly because the real experimentation comes in the song's lyrics. The instrumental is simple, with rattling pianos, deep percussions, and striking guitar licks. More or less, this is as simple as a pop song as there can possibly be, just with the added flair of Eno's unpredictability. The lyrics, however, help pose a long-standing question that had been eating at Eno. He came up with this idea that he dubbed Scenius, which stands as the intelligence and intuition of of a whole cultural scene. Eno wanted to use lyrics that could awaken similar emotional experiences in all types of people. The constant repetition of the line, "I'll come running to tie your shoes," creates a common bond between nearly all of the listeners. It feels like we were being loved and cared for by someone who would fervently help with such a simple task as just tying our shoes. Not to mention, just singing the lines over and over again with a slight variation in pitch and timing helps us feel more connected to the track in general. I could go on and on about how this is a quintessential pop song that deserves to be studied like crazy, but I do have one more track I want to touch on. Finally, let's stray away from the remaining tracks that have lyrics on this album to focus on an instrumental song, Zawinul Lava. You could argue that the song is the seed in which that Music for Airports would grow into. The piano loop is eerily similar, along with the use of repetition in the chord progression. While there are so many different gorgeous songs off of this record, Zawinul Lava stands out for its use of space. Despite repeating itself for 3 minutes, the slight changes in the atmosphere around the basic construction of the song set off these tiny little fireworks in your brain. For anybody who's seen the movie Ratatouille, it's like when Remy takes the combination of food and eats them together for the first time and has this near out-of-body experience with shapes and colors. This is because when we hear the song, we become very accustomed to the repetition of the piano loop. So when we do hear something slightly different in the loop itself, we notice it more and it feels like a bigger deal. The ever so minute changes in the drums, synths, and strings each have a world-shattering effect on what was previously established. To me, this is the song that began to pave the way for Eno to become known as the godfather of ambient music. Yet the song is still somehow perfectly placed in the track list of a pop album. Truly a remarkable experience of a song. Brian Eno's musical career is one of never-ending progress and imagination. From albums like Taking Tiger Mountain and Another Green World to Music for Airports and My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, Eno is constantly pushing the envelope of song construction. But of all the Eno projects to research for this channel, Another Green World seemed like the perfect candidate for numerous reasons. First, and most obvious, this record is freaking wonderful. The sounds, textures, composition, and pacing are all glorious, as this album does not sound 45 years old. Second, this album has a certain character to it. Sure, most of that is due to the sonic landscape, but it's also the way that the album was recorded. How often do you hear of an album that is created with all these prolific artists, but none of which were actually in the same room together during the recording? Or that Eno was using index cards to determine what challenge he would overcome next? The history itself deserves more attention, as this album is truly an enigma. But finally, Another Green World is an album of feelings over thoughts. So many of the albums that we as a collective society deem great are ones that conjure or evoke thought and contemplation. Obviously, there is still feelings in the music of these records because, well, if there wasn't, why the hell would we listen in the first place? But on Another Green World, Eno sets aside all thoughts and sacrifices it for the warm embrace of delicately placed synths, drums, bass, and guitar. The lyrics mean absolutely nothing other than that they're supposed to make you feel something. Not to think, ponder, or scowl. The few lyrics in this album are utter nonsense. But it's through that nonsense that we find ourselves lost in the space between time and reality. Lost in a moment of lush avant-garde sounds that at the end of the day mean nothing in the literal sense. I'm a firm believer in albums that force us to experience something in order to help us grow as people and as a society, but the times that you are able to hear the nonsense of an artist who wants to be known as a non-musician, you should be able to embrace it with open arms. Brian Eno's Another Green World is just that. Another world that is very similar in shape, size, and color, but is off just enough for us to realize that it was all a false reality to help us get through the day. So, whether you've never heard this album before, or if it is a personal favorite of yours, Brian Eno's Another Green World will always be forever spinning. Thanks for watching.